It seems these days, modern Americans don't agree on very much. I think we can agree, though, that cost of living is far too high and inflation needs to come down. My question today is, will raising the federal minimum wage help with either of those? Let's discuss. The federal minimum wage has been the same since July of 2009. Am I the only one who thinks it is a fruitless battle that we continue to approach our federal government to change something they have been so resistant to for well over a decade now? Whereas another option is to go to our local state government and get them to change our state minimum wage, which supersedes the federal minimum wage. And 34 states have done that successfully. State governments are much more familiar with the expenses in their own state and what their citizens are paying. The federal government has proven time and time again how inefficient they are at passing any change that doesn't positively affect them. And we're also a capitalist society, meaning that money plays a prominent role in all decisions that are made. Having the states decide allows for much more frequent updates, as several states have in their laws somewhere that each year they'll evaluate and adjust accordingly, which in most states leads to a gradual increase over the years. Does that not make more sense than going through the same battle with the federal government to get them to change it? When I think of a minimum wage job, I think of entry level, basic, no need for any kind of special skills or credentials or anything like that. You apply for this job, you get the job, you learn the job on the job, and it teaches essential skills: how to arrive on time, how to be accountable, how to clock in and clock out and work with others. But I never thought a minimum wage job should be lived off of. It's a stepping stone. It's a first stepping stone for most people, but it was never intended to be a primary source of income. When I think of minimum wage jobs, I imagine workers being between the age of, say, 15, depending on the state, and early 20s. So they're still living at home, don't have a lot of expenses themselves, likely are able to use their money for however they want, whether they save it, whether they want to purchase a car with it, whatever it may be. But the average age of the minimum wage worker is 35. And no, you cannot live off of minimum wage. There's a distinction between minimum wage and a living wage. I think that a lot of the time people confuse the two, because living wages, again, goes back to the state and your region and just several factors like that. Whereas minimum wage, that is just an introductory wage. And a lot of the arguments against raising minimum wages, it would result in increase in prices, loss of jobs. So generally a negative impact on our current society. Whether these would actually happen, I don't know, because again, it hasn't changed in over a decade. But I do know through my research is the most impacted by potentially increasing the federal minimum wage are not the corporations, not the Walmarts and the Amazons of the world. It's the small businesses, the mom and pop places, the local independent businesses. They are the ones who suffer. Just think back to when you walked into any fast food establishment 5 years ago even. If you were to walk into that same establishment today, what's the price difference? Do you ever question why there is the price increase? I would compare hourly rates for employees 5 years ago to now, and that might be correlated with the increase in the food. We were at Chick-fil-A the other day. We've gotten the same exact meal when we first got together. When like 5 years ago is where I'm thinking, when we used to go to Chick-fil-A, it would cost us like right around $24 for both of us to get a meal, a nugget to share, and upgrade one or both of our drinks. About $24. Again, it was decent. Still, in our opinion, it was too expensive. The other day, we go to Chick-fil-A, and granted, we do live in a higher cost of living state. We spent $42 on the exact same meal as we got 5 years ago. We noticed on the receipt that it said, we're hiring, starting rate $19 an hour and free college. $19 an hour. And obviously, fast food restaurants do have different rates than the normal minimum wage, or they can vary in their rates. But I was blown away walking into Walmart. They have the sign outside. We're hiring $19 an hour starting rate, and $1.50 if you're willing to work overnight. And that's well above the minimum wage in my state. Would it really make that big of a difference in either cost of living or inflation if we raise the federal minimum wage, which only 1.1% of the current American population is living off? And I'm not trying to diminish those 3.4 million people, but I'm saying there may be a better option. In general, not a fan of big government. I think they have far too much control. Just my opinion. I think that the evidence shows that we can either continue going to the federal government and again fighting a losing battle as we have for the last decade, or we can instead go to our local state governments who are much more familiar with the expenses. Another thought that occurred to me as I was looking into this is, how do we as modern day Americans manage our finances? I won't say I was surprised by what I found. These days, it's not just important to have the necessity, food, clothing, your house, transportation of some sort, but it's also prioritized often to have the best of the best or have what everyone else has, which does lead to excess spending. So spending and living beyond our means. My mom taught me a really good lesson when I was just starting work. She said, no matter what your pay increases to, live below your means. And I'll admit that that is not possible a good majority of the time, but that was a really good lesson for me to learn as I was starting out in the workforce, because it made me think every single paycheck about the things that I could purchase or that I needed to save up for, or things like that. It helped me to get into the right mindset about money. I guess not everyone has moms like mine, and they just don't manage their money well. I saw a stat as I was looking into this, that only 32% of Americans have a budget of some sort, whether it be written out each month or just like on an app or anything like that. And that makes me question, how do they know where their money is going then? And I am by no means an exception to this. My husband and I at one point had to sit down and say, what are we spending all of our money on that we don't have left over each month when we both had pretty decent jobs? So we went through our bank account, and it was literally what my dad coins as nickel and dime ourselves into debt, or not debt, but not being able to save anything, which is a priority for us. That has been a priority for both of us from the very beginning. But at that point in time, we were just spending it on miscellaneous things, not necessities. And we were overspending on the necessities. Well, we were young at the time as well, so that didn't help. But when we looked at our outgoing expenses each month, we wrote out a budget. These are our bills. This is how much rent is. This is how much car payment is. This is how much insurances are. This is how much we should be spending on groceries, which cut it down quite a bit because we were just, I don't know if we were going to the store hungry or what, but we were spending so much on groceries for just the two of us. Once we planned out our budget and reviewed it every single month going forward, then it just became a habit, not a fun habit, because we wanted to still every now and again be able to buy whatever it was. But in the back of our heads, we always were thinking, do we have the money for that? And if the answer was no, then we wouldn't buy it. What we didn't do was put it on a credit card. We only recently started coming around to the benefits of a credit card. With credit cards, you have to be so responsible and pay off the full amount each month. Otherwise, there are consequences, like dings to your credit score. But that's what just over 80% of Americans openly admit to, saying they overspend. And if we just had bank accounts to rely on, that would be next to impossible to do. But credit cards just open all sorts of doors and do real damage if you are not fully aware of what holding a credit card means. I think most people look at credit cards and think, oh, my credit limit is $6,000. $6,000. That means I can spend $6,000 and have little to no impact on my finances. It's not coming out of my bank account. It's just free money. No. That is the most expensive money you'll ever spend. Because if you don't pay off the credit card each month, there are severe financial consequences, even though it may not seem that way. And no one wants creditors at their door or calling them. That's not a pleasant experience. So I think we just need to first, instead of continuing the fruitless battle of attempting to get the federal government to raise minimum wage, go to your local state governments and petition to have it raised. It may take a lot to get the policy passed. There's a much higher likelihood of it actually being done. Just look at these 34 other states. And we need to start thinking of ways, after figuring out what our total monthly income is, break down what we're spending on groceries, what we're spending on rent, transportation, all the essentials first, and where possible, make the essentials as inexpensive as possible. Granted, rent or mortgage, whichever, is going to cost a lot because housing is the number one expense. Next, transportation, food. Those are the three main expenses. I would say the most controllable expense of those is obviously groceries, and they are arguably very, very high compared to previously. There are ways you can save. One, starting to cook from home, not eating out, or just eating out once or twice a week and making it a special occasion. Not an expensive occasion, but just a special occasion where no one has to cook and you can just go out and enjoy a yummy meal. But during the week, or for the majority of it, cook at home. Cooking is an essential skill, and I'm honestly surprised that more people don't know how to cook beyond the simplest of dishes. There are YouTube videos galore to teach you really any skill set nowadays. I watch cooking shows all the time. I do enjoy cooking, and I do the majority of it in our house each week. And that's one of the ways that we save money, is figuring out a meal plan each week and prepping it at home. And that may sound boring, but there are benefits to cooking at home. Not only do you save a lot of money, but you also learn, again, a really good skill set, a good life skill, and you are able to control your nutrition better than, say, going out to a restaurant or picking up a frozen pizza. Again, there's nothing wrong with either of those things, but if you're tight on money, the number one way that you can change it is your groceries. There's so many videos on YouTube, budget-friendly groceries for my family, and, just so many of them. I used to watch this chick in particular because she has a family of, I think, 4, and she feeds her whole entire family with fairly tasty looking things for, I think the lowest I saw was $15 for 1 week. Granted, not the most extravagant meals you see here. She's pinto beans, which again can be made very delicious. Pinto beans make refried beans, so I'm all about it. There's so many different accounts just showing how to go grocery shopping on a budget, make meals on a budget. There are a lot of things out of our control when it comes to, a good portion of our life, things that others decide, whether it be the government or our bosses or whoever it is. But there are still things we can control. We have free speech, which lends to approaching our state governments about raising our state minimum wage, again, superseding the federal minimum wage. And again, minimum wage jobs were not meant to live off of. They were meant as an introduction to the workforce, something to build off of, and they still are to this day. People could be struggling making 6 figures in California, for instance, but oftentimes we'll find, if we write something out or just take the time to review it, there are ways that we can cut down in our monthly expenses. It's not easy. It may not even be enjoyable, but maybe that's the incentive we need to get a different job, to learn the skills that is more marketable in the current workforce. But those are just my 2 cents.